Good morning and welcome to Men's Health Week Awareness. My name is Corey Oles, and the men's ministry here at Grove Church will be recognizing Men's Health Week starting today. We're honored today to have Dr. Mason, who's going to start the week off talking about mental health. And I'd like to welcome you, Dr. Mason, and if you would, give us a brief introduction and tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay, good. Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Richard Mason. I am a licensed professional counselor, also a licensed substance abuse treatment provider, specializing in working with children with trauma-related issues and also depression as well, attention deficit disorders, and just basic behavior problems. I work within my own clinical practice, Monarch Clinical and Consulting Services over in Hampton, but I also do a number of consulting jobs working with different school divisions around the country, working with them to transform their school divisions into trauma skilled programs.
Awesome. What led you into that field of practice, so to speak?
Well, my journey is not the typical journey into mental health. Mm-hmm. I started out in undergrad as a political science pre-law major because ever since I was probably in a third grade or so, I talked about being a lawyer. Okay. But I've always volunteered, even in high school, working with children and youth types of programs. And coming to college, I continued that same practice. And I remember doing an internship my senior year with the court system because, of course, my journey was to head to law school. But I got involved with working with kids in some of the local community centers and then watching them get into trouble and coming into the court services unit. And that made me decide that I wanted to change my focus at that point because I wanted to work with kids prior to them getting involved into the system, right, which led me to getting my master's in counseling and then continuing on to get my licensure and then furthering my education to get my PhD.
Awesome. Mental health is definitely a hot topic these days. We had a quote or statement by Reverend T.D. Jakes that stated that a person you see on the outside is a reflection of the person on the inside. What does mental health mean in your estimation or in your definition? Well, or what is mental health, I guess?
Well, mental health is basically taking care of the mind, taking care of the psyche, which also reflects upon what you're doing with your body. As you talk about your triune, you're exactly right. So as a man thinketh, he does, and so we have to really look at mental health in terms of keeping us together. There is a study that has been done looking at adverse childhood experiences. Most people refer to as this the ACEs study. And they talk about childhood experiences that affect how you continue to live your life. It also affects how, your health standards, and so some of our childhood experiences affect our blood pressure, reflects our heart diseases and things like that, diabetes and all as well. And so the higher your ACE assessment score is, typically you're going to see a higher health risk as well.
Okay. You mentioned self-care. What are some forms of self-care that people who are listening can practice to help their mental health?
Well, definitely. People talk about exercise. They talk about eating right and those types of things. But also, what's most important is being able to talk about these things, looking at those issues that may be bothering you. Sometimes we tend to bottle a lot of stuff up. Sometimes we worry about a lot of things and we really don't talk about those things. That worry and that stress tends to take a toll on a person's body. And so when you're not putting yourself in a position to relax, talk about those things, eating healthy, relieving some of that stress, those things can create other issues that manifest themselves in things like anxiety.
Our slogan for our men's ministry is iron sharpens iron. And, in your opinion, what can brothers do to help other brothers who are dealing with mental health issues?
Interesting you talk about that, because a lot of organizations are looking at this particular issue right now, and have been for a few years now. And so one of the things we find when we're talking about men in general, men don't talk in terms of their feelings and in terms of emotions. And men go through things, and it starts in childhood. You think about your childhood experiences when you may have fallen down or something like that at the playground. You might have scraped your knee and you crying as a little boy. The first thing they say is, "You're all right, get back up and go on back out there," But a little girl is going to do the same thing. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to kiss it, put a pretty Band-Aid on it, and probably give her a popsicle, right. And so from that stage of life, we're taught that it's not okay for men to cry. It's not okay for men to share their emotions because it's seen as a sign of weakness. And so we have to look at how do we change that, because when we are put in that position and we're taught to stuff those feelings and those emotions, it puts us in a place where we could eventually experience rage, which some may look like anger, but it's actually rage. We cannot seem to get out any emotion. So it doesn't matter whether it's a happy emotion or a sad emotion, because we've packed so much down inside, it comes out as rage.
You mentioned trauma earlier. What is trauma, and how does trauma relate to mental health as well? I've heard that we've all experienced some type of trauma.
When you talk trauma, for the most part, most people tend to think of trauma as an experience such as dealing with PTSD, which takes more people to the mindset of dealing with our military personnel, looking at the warfare and types of combat activity and all that they've experienced. But every day, when you're talking about trauma, you're talking about domestic violence, you're talking about community-related violence, community shootings, and those types of things. And even now, whereas we are experiencing the access to the internet and we can see stuff, social media, George Floyd, for example, we experience secondary trauma by watching those things. We may not have been there, but we can see what actually happened. And so those experiences create those feelings and emotions of insecurity, not feeling safe, fearing for your life, and those types of things can then create those issues of anxiety, depression, and all. But when you look at other areas of trauma, okay, as we start talking, I mentioned earlier, talking about the adverse childhood experiences, we talk about those areas that deal with, community violence and stuff like that or whatever. But we've also started looking at other areas that create trauma that are rooted in our community. And so we talk about a pair of ACEs. So we talk about those things that we can see, such as, like I said, the community-based violence, domestic violence and those things. But now we're also really looking at poverty, homelessness. Those things also create that sense of fear. If you have a child that is not sure where their next meal is going to come from, Yeah, being homeless, sleeping in a car, sleeping on a park bench. Those types of experiences also create those things. And now we're also dealing with the time of social unrest when we're seeing the insurgents at the Capitol. Our children are watching that, our communities are watching those things, and so it takes us to a place of uncertainty and not feeling safe. We talk about those hierarchy of needs with Maslow. The big thing is how safe are we?
Right.
And so when we take ourselves out of those positions, it creates that sense of not being safe. And so we have to look at that as a health crisis. Virginia is one of I think it's less than 10 states at this point that have actually declared racism as a public health crisis. And so we have to really look at racism in how it's embedded in all of our systems right now, because those things are truly rooted in mental health. And when we start talking about that mental health component, we know that our mental health affects our entire well-being.
We are now hopefully coming out of this pandemic. How has the pandemic played a role in mental health? What are some of the things that you've seen with the pandemic?
Well, first of all, I'll say this to the parents. You guys have been at home dealing with these kids all day long, and that's huge,
Right.
Whereas, parents are certainly worried about how to maintain their own job. And then they're also worried about how to be teacher to the students, because you think about it, most parents are with their children probably about 4 hours a day. They get them from the after school program, and they at 6 o'clock, by 10 o'clock, that kid is in the bed. So that's 4 hours. Now parents are dealing with their kids all day long.
All day long.
And so, so whereas a teacher may be sending a note home, little Billy is too active. He's this, he's that, and of course we as parents, not my child, no, not little Billy. No, he's great. But now we're finding out that little Billy is just as active as these teachers are telling you. And so it's a little frustrating, at this point. And so now parents are having to teach, their children, and that gets frustrating, because I'll tell you now, when my son was small, third grade math did me in,
Right.
And so I had to get him a tutor,
Right.
And so I know parents feel frustrated not being able to provide the resources and the assistance to their children, being with them all day, every day. So that creates that added stress. The other piece, when you talk about, especially with men, the pandemic has really created some challenges for men, because most men, as I said earlier, really don't talk in terms of feelings and emotions. However, men tend to bond around sporting events where they may go out to, let's say, Buffalo Wild Wings and watch the game and things of that nature, have a spirited beverage. We're at church, so yeah, we're having a spirited beverage, So most men tend to meet in that capacity. But with all of the bars and things of that, places like that really shutting down, whereas men can't go and have those types of interactions. Most men are now closed off from what is typically their outlet, their resource to be able to just talk in general, to release some type of pressure or stress or anxiety about their day and what's going on in their life. So now they're stuck in the house.
Right.
At this point. And so it creates a challenge.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into my next question too, in regards to what are some, I guess, techniques for us to bounce back as men when we've experienced levels of trauma, whether it's the PTSD or what have you? How can we bounce back? What are some tools that we can give the audience to say, try these type of things to help come out of whatever you might be going through?
Okay. Well, first of all, establish a network, and I know I've talked with several churches just in terms of some things that they can do in terms of developing networks, small group cells where men can just talk to one another and talk about anything, and not just, faith-based types of things, but everyday problems, and not that you're setting up anyone in the group to be a therapist or anything like that, but you're setting people up to just be able to feel free to share. Now, the other part of that is having boundaries, and also, I guess, a certain level of confidentiality and all, because of course, as men bring these discussions or things like that to the group, you want to make sure that it's not getting outside of the group. The other thing is creating buddy systems whereby men can reach out to one another and just pick up the phone, because most men don't talk on the phone, unless it's a work call or an organizational call, anything like that. I'm gonna give you 5 good minutes, So, and that's the case with most men, because most men are typically more solution focused. When I pick up the phone, I'm going to call you. What time are we meeting today?
Exactly.
I'll see you then.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, men should be in a position where they can just find out how, what's going on, how's your day, anything happening with your kids or anything like that. And that gives you a sense of dialogue that you can talk about those things and release some of that stress and that pressure. Because when we don't talk about things, we don't normalize our challenges that we have, realizing that the same issue that you may be having with your son, I'm having with mine. Exactly. And it's not just me, And so that normalizes things, and that also kind of brings that stress level down just a little bit. Doesn't change the problem, but it lets you know that I'm not the only one going through this challenge, because that's often a problem with our church folks. We come to church with that church face on, How you doing, Brother O's? I'm blessed and highly favored. The Lord is good today. At home, your world is turned upside down, and your world is going crazy. But at church, you're going to come in because you want to let folks know how good the Lord is. But the reality is, you need to also let them know that even in the midst of my challenges, even in the midst of my struggles, I still have faith.
Preach now.
Okay. So, and that's it, that's really a big part of it.
That's good stuff. So you kind of set yourself up, because hopefully we'll have you in on Saturday when we do our roundtable discussion with all the men. We're going to invite men in on Saturday prior to Father's Day, and hopefully you can have some time to come out and talk to us. But hey, man, I really appreciate you coming in tonight or today. If you would, give us 2, 3, 4 things that you would like to leave us with.
Well, first of all, the first thing I want people to always understand when I talk about mental health is that mental health is real, okay? And it's okay to say that you need help. One of the things we have to do is really get rid of the stigma of mental health. And we have to bring it to the forefront, and we have to talk about what it truly means. The other thing is, if you find yourself in a position, talk to someone. Okay, finding yourself a good therapist. I always tell people everyone needs a good therapist. As a therapist, I have a therapist. I have to have check-ins, because I listen to everybody else's stuff. I have to have somewhere to put that too, And so we really have to look at where we are with, our own mental health, and not feel the stigma of reaching out to someone to get the help that we need. And finally, just enjoy life. We work hard, and so you have to find ways to relax. And most times people think that that means going on an elaborate vacation. Sometimes it's just finding ways to enjoy yourself locally, doing little things that takes care of yourself, and so take the time to really enjoy you and relieve some of that stress, because the more stress that we continue to put on our bodies, it takes away from our quality of life.
Awesome, man. Again, I appreciate you being here. It was a privilege and a pleasure, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule, and hopefully we'll see you on Saturday.
Thank you for having me.
All right.